I'll try to go through this really fast because I know it's been a long day, and it's really been very educational for me. I so appreciate being invited to be here. My journey to here started with the birth of my profoundly disabled child, and actually ended, I lost my child this year, and right after I met Milton Chen through Christopher's doctor. My son is Christopher. And he had been telling me about telemedicine and barriers to care and pre-disease windows and everything that a former dancer and a fundraiser was trying to catch up on. But I understood that my son would probably still be here today if that care that you're talking about providing for vulnerable populations like my son existed today. So thank you for everything that you do from a mom. But I know Milton just wanted me to tell my story and maybe give you some fundraising tips. I don't know why you want them, but it seems like you all need a lot of money. So, okay. I was a dancer. Let's start. Okay. So who's from Canada? Someone's from Canada. They stood up a little while ago. I was born in England, raised in Toronto, became a dancer, taught myself to dance, became a dancer, model, and actress, and then I married an entertainer who lived in Las Vegas, and so I moved to Las Vegas, and I became a dancer or model actress in Las Vegas, and there I am. I was a Suzanne Summers lookalike with Elvis and Marilyn right there. So life was really great, and then Christopher was born. And the incidence of Christopher's birth is that we decided that my entertainer husband was going to be appearing in Toronto on the due date. So we had our home in Las Vegas, but I jumped on a junket flight. Does anyone know what a junket flight is? They're industry flights that they used to fly a lot in Las Vegas. Some people are nodding. So Wayne Newton was a really good friend. He got me a free seat on this junket flight. I was 8.5 months pregnant. But I was going to go to Toronto and have the baby there. And mid-flight, I went into labor, and it turned out that there were 75 doctors on the plane. It was a medical junket. So I was in pretty good hands. The plane landed in Toronto. It almost landed in Chicago because the doctor said, we can divert the plane because you're an emergency. But we continued on to Toronto, and 3 hours later, Christopher was born. And he was born with Down syndrome at North York General Hospital in Toronto. And that started me on a journey of becoming a fundraiser and a disability advocate. Because what happened is that because of the virtue of the fact that Christopher was born in Canada with Down syndrome, I could not get him into the United States. Not because he was born in Canada, but because he was born with Down syndrome in Canada. So that's when I found out that there were laws that prohibited people with disabilities from entering the United States. So he fell into an exclusionary class of citizens. United States said people exempt from entering the United States as permanent residents were number 1, criminals, number 2, retarded people, and it went on. And that was the language at the time. And I remember thinking, well, Canada wouldn't be that mean and discriminate against people. And the Canadian law said people exempt from entering Canada as permanent residents are number 1, morons, imbeciles, and idiots, and their families. Yeah, so that was the language, and this is not the Dark Ages. And by the way, those exclusionary laws still exist between the United States and Canada if you have a child with a disability. The laws have relaxed somewhat, but it's a fight to get your disabled child into the country. So there's my little guy. He's a cute little guy. At 18 months of old, he was labeled an undesirable alien in the United States. So eventually, Vice President Hubert Humphrey became Christopher's sponsor. So at age 2, Chris was able to come into the United States. At that point, I had started helping nonprofit organizations in Canada and also in Las Vegas. And so we brought Chris in And then when Hubert Humphrey died, Chris was 8 years old, and we were told to get Chris out of the country. So I didn't take him out of the country. I had now been fundraising for this organization, and I, seat of the pants, learned how to fundraise. And was doing really well, and we just kept Chris with us. So I harbored an illegal alien in my home for almost 18 years. And it's too long of a story to tell you. I do have a book, and you will have to read it. You go on my website and get it. And it'll tell you how we got Chris legal. But right before his 18th birthday, he became a legal resident on stage. There he is with his brother, Jerry Tarkanian, Wayne Newton, the Everly Brothers, and the Folies Bergère. He became a legal resident. I'm immersed in this program called Opportunity Village. I have raised about $500 million for that one organization because of my Chris. So all roads lead back to my son Christopher, and has led me here today. And you know, when I listen to everything that you have to say, I'm so excited for the future of kids like these kids right here, that there will be no longer be barriers to their care because you're going to solve it. So I created things like the Magical Forest. Have you ever been to Las Vegas in the wintertime? Go to the Magical Forest. It's a wonderful Christmas project. I created the World Santa Run. That's our former mayor, and his wife is now the mayor. That's Oscar Goodman. He was a mafia attorney, and he became mayor. Las Vegas is a very interesting place to live. That's just having fun, fundraising. I'm now a speaker. I'm a nonprofit consultant, and I have clients around the world. And I continue on this journey that my son laid out for me. There's the book. All proceeds go to the Christopher Smith Foundation that I named for my son, Christopher, and it's a caregiving organization. So I want to say thank you to caregivers through this nonprofit that I've created. And there you have something about the Christopher Smith organization. And now I just want to tell you a little bit about raising money. So the first thing is that I always contend that you already know all the people you need to know to raise all of the money you need to raise. Does anyone know what the number one reason is that people give? Say that again? Because they don't know enough people. Anyone else? Huh? Tax deduction? The number one reason people give, fundraiser in the back, the number one reason that people give is because they were asked. And the funny thing is, we all don't like to ask for money. They say the three things that we fear in life the most: public speaking, dying, and asking people for money. So we're not going to get the money if we don't ask. And it's always important to know how much to ask for. And always ask high, because you can always come low. And I've learned those lessons. I cut my teeth, seat of the pants training. So eyes and ears before mouth. When you're sitting down with a donor, try to remember that it's about them, not about you. And I have an example. I sat down with a very, very important guy in Las Vegas. He's the guy that lent the money to Steve Wynn. They say he put the glitter on Glitter Gulch in downtown Las Vegas. I was very lucky to get a meeting with him. E. Perry Thomas is his name. And I went to his office. A former governor had gotten me this meeting. And I was so very nervous, and I sat down with him and started talking to him. We wanted to honor him and raise $50,000. This is 38 years ago. And I sat down and I started to talk. And I talked, and I talked, and I talked, and I talked. I was so nervous that I talked, and I talked, and I talked. And then a couple of times, I saw his eyes flip over to the clock on the wall. I saw his eyes darting around the room. He was trapped. And I thought, if I stop talking, he's going to throw me out. So I just kept talking. I talked and I talked. And then finally I took a breath. And he went, "I'll give you $50,000 if you don't honor me." And he called in his secretary really quickly. And the secretary came in. I got a check and I walked out with $50,000. That was what I wanted to raise for this event. So I called my benefactor that had gotten me in, because I was really embarrassed. actually been thrown out, but I had 50,000 in my hand. And I called, we didn't have cell phones back then. I called the former governor, and I was afraid to tell him. I said, well, I told him the story, and he just laughed so hard. He said, let's just find 10 more people that don't want to be honored, and I'll send you in there. So I went out and did that. No is not an option. For me, no is just the beginning of a negotiation. And you know, a lot of us, we hate to hear no. But no really isn't really no. Sometimes it's no, not now, no, not you, no, somebody else, no, maybe later. My one quick funny story about that is early on, I wanted to have a gift wrap booth at the Boulevard Mall. I thought it was a great idea. I went and met with them, and I said, we'll have all these volunteers, we'll wrap gifts. And they said, do you know how much space is in a mall? And I'm going, yes, but we'll bring all of these people in, it'll be great PR. And they said, no. It was no. I really got a firm no. And I went back, this was my very first fundraising idea. And so I went back to the office, and I thought it was a great idea. About 3 weeks later, I'm reading the newspaper. Newspapers, those things that you open, you know, the paper. I'm reading the newspaper, and I see new management at the Boulevard Mall. I went down to the mall, went in, I said, hi, I'm Linda Smith with Opportunity Village, and we have a gift wrap booth, and we didn't decide where it's going to be. And the new guy said, oh, okay, well, let's go down and pick the spot. So I had a gift wrap booth at the Boulevard Mall for 15 years. Management by walking around versus management by walking outside. I'm here, I'm outside the comfort zone. This is scary, sitting, you guys are so smart. It was really frightening sitting here listening to you and trying to pick up and understand. But I'm going to gain so much from this. I have copious notes that I'm going to take back. And somewhere in here, there's going to be new donors, and I have a new friend, and I have a fundraising friend that's going to recommend me that I said that we had lunch. And I know, unless he decides to throw me out right now, that something good will come of this. But this is what we have to do. We have to get outside our comfort zone. Who is it that we can meet? And I know that I introduced you to the Queen of Versailles' husband, right? Yeah. So I'm so impressed with what you're doing that here's a billionaire for you, right? Something good is going to come out of all of this. I know it. And I know my angel Chris is watching over me right now as we try to change the world. Being in the moment, this is my last story. Again, we have to remember that in fundraising, it's always about them, not about you. So I wanted to ask a donor at the time. It was the biggest donation I had ever asked for. We needed $35 million to build a residential community. And so we were going to this donor for $25 million. This was a lot of money from one donor. And we practiced. I practiced with the head of our organization. I was the fundraiser, he ran the organization. We had a board member with us. We sat and we met and we talked and we practiced. And the board member was going to talk about why he supports the organization. Executive director was going to talk about the programs, and I was going to do the ask. We went in, sat down. The trustees came in. Start going through our routine that we had practiced. And they're nodding their heads and they're listening. And something in the back of my head, I started to think, is 25 million the right number? And we had all agreed it was the right number, but you just can't leave money on the table. Just thinking this through. And then it was time for me to talk. And so I started to tell a story. And I talked about one of our families who had died of a broken heart because the one thing that he wanted most of all was a home for his Down syndrome daughter. And as I was telling this story, I looked at the trustee, and there were only 3 trustees. And as I'm telling this story, I choked because I got wrapped up in my own story. And I'm thinking about this dad, and I'm thinking about me, and the one thing that we don't want to do, and right before my son passed away, I was telling the doctors, I don't want him to outlive me because I don't know who's out there, who will love him like I love him. And so I know this, and I live it, and I believe it. And I'm telling them that this dad died of a broken heart. And so I choked up, and I started to cry, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, how unprofessional. This is all going through my head, and I can't get the words out. And then I looked at the donor, and I saw tears. And so I asked for $35 million, and I got it. So thank you. So the moral of that story is be in the moment. Watch for the signs. I could go on forever. I know my time is up. Any questions that you have for me?
Linda, thank you so much. That was just so inspirational. Questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Best of luck to you.
Linda,
Thank you.
Question. Any questions for?
They're hungry.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're asking for $35 million, you've made some progress with the discomfort in asking for money. What have you done to make yourself more comfortable and confident in those moments going in and asking for big numbers?
I think the thing that fancy professional fundraisers fail to do is understand that the person they're talking to is just a real human being just like you. And just being real and treating your donor as you would treat your best friend. So I think I've been very successful in remembering that first dollar I got from that particular donor 35 years ago, and basically treating your donor like your friend. Thank you.
Any other questions? Linda, thank you so much. It was so good to. So good. We would love to, get the whole community figure out using telemedicine, do something, hopefully a tool to support your mission.
Yes, I hope so.
Thank
There
you
to
so
help.
much.